back. All right. So, all right.
For the wireless radius logs, is it just the 10.1 log?
Yeah, it's just project 10.1. Yeah. Or 10-1 or, yeah. All right. Okay, so we left off an encryption, right? And so we basically encrypt things basically to keep it confidential, right? Although security has the triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or CIA, right? But really encryption is mostly about confidentiality. Right, we've got different kinds of keys, private key or public key. If we use just a single key to encrypt and decrypt, it's known as symmetric encryption. If we use two keys, a public key and a private key, it's asymmetrical. And so you encrypt with one and decrypt with the other. But your private key, you keep private. All right, so got all kinds of information on encryption. I'm not really going to cover that. IPSec, right? That is a nice invention that we've got to encrypt our traffic. We got transport mode and tunnel mode. Many times we're dealing with a tunnel mode. I'm sorry. But it allows us, it has this 5-step actions, right? The initiation, key management, security negotiations, data transfer, and then finally termination. But it's highly effective. It's a really good resource if you need to transfer data. And then, so they talk about SSL, but it's really been replaced by TLS, right? So TLS basically replaced SSL, but we just keep calling it SSL just because we don't want to give up names, I guess. I don't know. But it's really TLS today. And then we have Datagram Transport Layer Security, or DTLS, right, for streaming communications. And then they talk about our remote access. So you could have dedicated devices or software running on a server, and they have these remote access servers that allow us to connect, and we'll go in here. So, right, so you had a home user, mobile user needing to connect, and it connects to the remote access server. But typically, you have it here. You're going over the internet, connecting to the remote access server, and then you're getting access to things on the local local area network, excuse me, as if you were there. And so we have several types. Point-to-point over a dedicated line happens fewer nowadays because VPN has by and far away taken over, because dedicated lines are super expensive, right? But you can use a VPN over the internet, and that's a much cheaper connection, and you can get the same results. Now, for some of the site-to-sites, yeah, you're using dedicated lines because you got so much traffic, and the internet connection normally isn't high enough quality. And then you just have these terminal emulations, which, I mean, I guess it's a form of remote access, but it's just you doing command line from your desktop or whatever to a remote device. I have no idea why we mentioned SLIP, because it is a very old protocol. But use a point-to-point protocol. and it's used to basically came out of like the dial-up area, but but it's point to point, and allows you to negotiate a connection between two computers, and the encryption is considered weak by today's standard. So terminal emulation, right? So the command line version is Telnet and SSH. Telnet is not secure. So, I mean, the fact that it's available is kind of scary, but everything is clear text, over the wire. Secured shell is what anyone will use to connect command line nowadays. But then we have some graphical interfaces like remote desktop that's built into Windows, and it will open up a window and a connection just as if you were at the desktop. So you can sit here, open up a remote desktop to a server or a desktop in New Jersey, and it would look like you were just logged in there at the desktop. And you can use others, JoinMe, PNC, or TeamViewer, and there's thousands of other companies out there that have the same type of software. But it's very useful. I'm not going to go into more detail with this. Yeah. All right. FTP, again, like many other things like Telnet, we should not use FTP at all. It's a file transfer protocol, but we have FTPS and SFTP. So FTP security or secure FTP. Either one works. They both encrypt data, and it's more secure than just FTP. Trivial FTP, TFTP, that's typically what you're using to upload firmware to like a Cisco switch or router or some networking device. That's typically where you'll see trivial FTP used, and in most cases you're on site. You're not, and you're just doing firmware. It's nothing that needs to be secured, right? But it also doesn't have logins, and VPNs, right? That's like the number one way people are connecting remotely nowadays. So we have site to site, or client to site, or host to host. Here's an example of a site to site, right? We have all these branch offices. We have 3 branch offices and a corporate office, and they're all connected by VPN gateways, and so that they, even though they're in separate cities, in separate states, they can look at one network and access resources locally. Versus the client connection is where you maybe have some remote users that need to go over the internet to get into a branch office or corporate or whatever. This is your what's it, client to site. I don't think we have a host to host, but a host to host would just be 2 devices, and you're just connecting, over the internet, a remote connection, VPN. This can just be router-based VPN. It's the most common implementation on the Unix-based networks. And then server-based VPNs are found on Windows, because Windows has a service on there, remote access servers, that allows for VPNs easily. But then you can also use a VPN concentrator, which is just a device that allows easy setup of VPN, easy setup and management of VPNs. And we can use IPSec or SSL typically to secure the VPNs. And this is just showing the concentrator being there behind the router and the firewall, and users coming in, and they'll be just like any of those other devices on the network. Right, so dynamic multi-point VPN uses using Cisco devices, and it creates VPN tunnels between branch locations as needed, instead of requiring constant static tunnels for site-to-site connections. So they just spin up when they're needed, so they're dynamic, which can be good, I guess, but and you won't have to require dedicated lines is the reason for that, I would imagine. So it keeps the cost down. Right, so tunneling is just all about keeping our stuff secure. Tunnels operate at our data link layer, right, layer 2. But some will work at layer 3, enabling additional features and options, which most of them are at layer 2. And then our IP packet, right, really everything gets encrypted except for the IP header and the IPSec header. And that's mainly because it needs to know how to route it. So it needs to have the header information, but the rest of the payload and all that can be encrypted and hidden from everyone. We'll just go into some protocols. That is the chapter. So that is all I have for the lecture part of this. We just have, let me go back here. All right, so just you have the lab that's due tonight, the wireless radius if you haven't done that. Make sure you're working on the video project. Yeah. Oops.
The outline is due next week, right?
What is going on? Oh, this is, no, oh, sorry. This is the online class. They get a little break. All right, so yeah, so the wireless radius is due Wednesday tonight, and then the video project outline is due Sunday. Yeah. And then the rough draft will be due on the 2nd. Yeah, so that's all I have for you tonight. Yeah.
So